AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey, and by Intrepid Control Systems, over-the-air engineering. Boost your game.
Vasilash.
John, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. So, for many of our viewers this morning, they were without AT&T cell service with the network going down. And I began to wonder about all of the vaunted services that are being promulgated by OEMs about how wonderful it'll be to connect to the cloud and so on and so forth. And here's AT&T that is down for hours. And I mean, emergency services, we're not able to get phone calls and on and on and on. I mean, what's your take on that?
I hate living in the future. That's my take. Here's the future. It was all supposed to be grand and everything works. And that's one of the great lines in the movie Spaceballs. There's some malfunction in one of the spaceships and, Dark Helmet's comment is, geez, even in the future, nothing works. Mm-hmm. So that's where we're at.
No, it's a tough situation, I think. I think that there's probably a lot of rethinking going on. What is in the vehicle and what does the vehicle connect to outside?
What's the redundancy? What's the backup? What's plan B?
Yeah,
right.
And it's quite a situation.
It is. Well, actually, we should ask our two guests here today because we got two car critics here. These guys probably drive more cars. They drive more cars than we do, Gary, and we drive a lot of cars.
They drive more cars than any 10 people we know.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got Henry Payne, car critic for the Detroit News, Mark Phelan, car critic for the Detroit Free Press. They've been on the show before. I don't know if you guys have ever been on the show together before, though.
Couple of times.
Great. I don't know. That's great to be here with Mark. Yeah, Mark. I must say, Mark was so kind to me over the years because I came into the Detroit News on the editorial side. I came in as a cartoonist and a writer on the editorial page, but I'm always an auto guy. I'm just marinated in auto since I was a kid. So Mark and I got to know each other pretty quick. He's the auto guy. We'd talk outside of the office, and so we were friendly right away. And then when I became auto critic about 10 years ago, 10 years into my tenure at Detroit News, Mark was really helpful. Sort of bringing me into the fold and, telling me how things worked. So,
thank you.
Mark's a good guy.
So it's your fault.
At the other even though he's a rival.
When I met him, he was only 5'2".
Yeah. Right. So, Mark, estimate, how many cars do you drive a year?
Oh, Lord. More than one a week because I try not to.
So more than 1 week, there's 100 cars right off the bat.
Yeah,
and you probably go to
at least 75.
Multiple cars, right?
Yes.
So even more than one a week. How many cars do you drive, Henry? Do you think a year?
A year?
Yeah, 100, easy over 100.
That's probably about right. Yeah, I just figure a couple a week.
Yeah, and you guys get in just about everything.
Pretty
right?
much.
Yeah. Yeah, try to drive everything. I think we drive a lot of cars twice because you're constantly comparing.
Yep.
And I race cars, so I get into a variety of cars off road as well, and I like to get into used cars, kind of get into older cars, which is refreshing because so much has changed in this industry.
Oh yeah, let me tell you right off the bat, if a
remarkable.
car doesn't have a backup camera, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, and some of the new windows were designed with the assumption that nobody would ever use the backup camera, the rear view mirror. Yeah. But and as well as all the new vehicles that come out, we gotta keep abreast of what are the leaders that are already out there. So I mean, I got out of an Accord. I've got to drive an Altima at some point. There's a lot of stuff to keep track of.
Yeah, and then when we're both car of the year jurists.
Yep.
And so then when that
as are Gary and I,
as are you guys, and so that's another deep immersion.
And some of those cars you end up driving 3 times before you cast your vote. Yeah.
So this is why we have you guys here today, because you have driven so many cars. You guys know what's in the market right now. You guys have a good sense of what's coming to the market. And you guys also have your finger on the pulse of how these car companies are doing. What promises they're making, what promises they're keeping. And so let's sort of walk through some of these companies and, and let's see where it goes. I mean, don't have to stick to like, okay, we're going to talk about this car, this car, this car. So, in general, okay, so Chevrolet has been making arguably stalwart efforts to become more electrified, yet, we're seeing problems with the EVs slowly coming out. We've seen the Colorado and Canyon now having a software problem. So Mark, what do you think is going on over at Chevy, and what can we look forward to from Chevy?
I'm already going to go off the board and broaden it a little bit. It's a GM thing, not just a Chevy thing. And it's funny, I had been writing columns for a while saying they've got a real problem. First of all, the engineering of all the electric vehicles seems to be outstanding. I mean, the ones that I've driven, I imagine the ones you've driven on vehicle introductions and the like, they deliver on all of the promises that they make. But when they get out into the real world, they've got software crashes that essentially render them unusable. And I think at this point, what I had thought was an EV problem is a software problem. GM really needs to get its hands around the software that they're putting into new vehicles, because that is getting in the way of getting a lot of people into some pretty good products.
That and batteries, right? I mean, they haven't been able to build batteries. That's what's really held them back.
From what I understand,
I've heard mixed, because we got a viewer, very loyal viewer here, contacted me. He says, I got a Cadillac Lyriq and bought one for my wife. He says, we've had no problems with that thing whatsoever. Not a software glitch. So, it seems to be hit or miss with GM based on that.
And the batteries, I think that problem they had figured out. At least they had bought the wrong equipment, and equipment was being delivered slowly to build the batteries, and that they seem to have sorted out, at least to a greater extent, I think, than the ongoing problems with software. My understanding is that the stuff that led them to allow us all to drive, and I think I speak for all of us when I say like the Chevy Blazer EV back in December, but then all of a sudden they weren't selling them anymore. Those problems, from what I understand, are all software, not battery.
And what I want to know too is GM sold 100,000 Ultium EVs in China last year. 100,000. So they built all the batteries, and I haven't heard of any software glitch problems coming out of the Chinese media about these things. What the heck, man?
I just shout out to John Volker, another NACTOY juror and one of the great specialists in electric vehicles. He texted me today a story that he wrote that's in Inside EVs Today that goes through all of the GM Ultium EV problems, and it gets into China and it addresses it. Basically, from what he says, two things. Different, they're using the Ultium brand name, but different actual battery cells, and they are using Chinese sourced manufacturing equipment. And China already makes so many batteries that they didn't have the same problems getting them built.
But what about the software then?
He said he just addressed the batteries in it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Henry, what do you think about? We'll bring it back to Chevrolet, despite Mr. Phelan's efforts to make this broader at this point. We talk about these vehicles. I mean, the Blazer EV may be wonderful, but I mean, it seems to me that the consumers are going to be a little skittish about a vehicle that has these problems.
Yeah, I think all these brands, particularly the mainstream brands, have a real challenge right now. I mean, we have in the industry. The government hasn't been down the throats of these manufacturers like this since the 1970s. 1970s created real problems for this industry, ultimately leading to bankruptcies. I think.
Well, let's give a shout out to the Lehman failure that crushed the entire world economy. It wasn't just bad automaking.
No, I'm talking about the 80s when Chrysler needed.
One bankruptcy.
Okay,
yeah. Bad management.
Yeah, I mean, just that initial 70s tail where Detroit manufacturers were really good at building big cars. All of a sudden, couldn't build big cars anymore because they couldn't meet CAFE laws. And now you have, we just reviewed this week a $50,000 Honda Prologue. All the Hondas that I've driven have been Civics and Accords and entry-level things. Here comes Honda with its first EV. It's a $50,000 thing. Is that where Honda lives? Same thing.
You can pay that much for an Odyssey or a Passport. I looked it up when I was writing my prologue column.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's their entry level EV. It's not a $20,000 EV. It's a $50,000 EV. Same for Blazer. Blazer comes in with the EV. It's the same price as a Cadillac Lyriq. I mean, it is really hard to make electric cars cheap. And I think Chevy, to go to your point, Gary, this is a brand, an affordable brand that is struggling to make an affordable EV. I mean, the Bolt and the Bolt EV were $15,000 north of a Trax, which is a comparable SUV. And what I've been struck by with this EV is they've come in hard. Chevy has with the Bolt and the Bolt EUV, and ultimately going up, trying to go electric. At the same time, they've come in with a spectacular redesign of the Chevrolet Trax, $21,000 car. I would say arguably is the best entry-level car in the market. So they're still aware of what their brand is, which is affordable entry-level vehicles, at the same time that they're struggling to meet these government mandates with electric vehicles.
But Chevy sells more $50,000 a year vehicles than anybody else. They're just Silverados and Tahoes. Chevy's not a cheap brand. Chevy does need to have an affordable vehicle. And the Trax, you're right, it's a great vehicle, and the Trailblazer is wonderful too.
What is GM thinking? Pricing a Lyriq the same as a Blazer? I mean, Alfred Sloan is spinning in his grave. Remember, he created this whole stair step, move up the GM brands from Chevy to Pontiac to Buick to Oldsmobile to Cadillac. And having a Cadillac cost the same as a Chevy, I think, is madness from a brand standpoint.
Having a Cadillac that is the same kind of vehicle, particularly. I mean, there have been Chevy pickups that cost more than Cadillacs right now. Corvettes have cost as much as a lot of Cadillacs. But having the two of them in the same segment, that one baffles me. I mean, the Lyriq is a great buy.
The Lyriq's a great car. Exactly. I like it a lot.
And a terrific value.
And they priced it to sell, right? Yeah. But to have a Chevy at the same price, I think, is going to destroy brand value.
Well, I don't understand why they brought the Chevy in as a loaded vehicle that had to cost $50,000 to $60,000, in base. Why didn't they say, if you want to spend $60,000 on a GM, midsize SUV, God bless you, here's a Lyriq, and if you want to spend $40,000, we got a great Blazer for you.
Well, Mark,
they could have,
this goes
but they
to the
didn't.
point of you were saying earlier that General Motors is delivering on its promises in effect, but isn't it sort of backsliding in terms of what it is telling people they will be paying for these vehicles? So, for example, you mentioned we're all jurors for the North American Car, Truck, and Utility of the Year. We all drove the Silverado EV, which was supposed to start at $40,000. And gee, what was the one that we drove? The work truck for what was it, $75,000 bucks?
It's a shell game, but it's the same shell game everybody plays. There will eventually be a Silverado EV, priced in the 40s. They're just not in any hurry to start making them, because if they can ever actually get up to speed building the others, they'll be making more money on the ones in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But I feel like that's the same thing they do. Every automaker has a base model that they hope and pray will be 1% of their sales mix.
Right.
But again, you look at these disruptions. I mean, when governments come in and disrupt markets, in the 1970s, huge opening for the Japanese. The Japanese came in and got a toehold on this market because of the CAFE laws. You have the same, and just what Mark's talking about.
I'm not sure I totally buy that, Henry, in the sense that the Japanese came in well before CAFE laws.
Oh, yeah.
They were making big inroads in the early 70s before any emission standards really showed up, or safety standards.
Right.
And they won baby boomer generation over with much better quality. I mean, Toyotas and
with
Datsuns at the time.
Small affordable cars.
Well, but they made CAFE.
Fuel economy.
But they made CAFE because they had fuel economy. They're small cars.
Right, they had fuel economy, and there was the oil embargo, and so people were like, gee whiz, we want to buy cars that get good miles per gallon. We can buy a big car from Detroit, and it's not going to have very good range in terms of our fuel efficiency. I'll buy a Civic.
Right.
And then when GM and Ford and Chrysler tried building small fuel efficient cars, they had never done it here because America had the cheapest gas in the world. And so they were bad at it for more than a decade. And the Japanese were coming in with really high, quality stuff because Japan was a small country with very high taxes on fuel. So you're right, Henry. American gasoline taxes should be higher. That would have fixed all of this.
I'm a low
there you
gas
go.
guy. I'm a low gas guy.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is there's an opening now. I mean, given what we're talking about here, there is a real opening for the Chinese
Totally
to
agree.
come in at the low level, just like the Japanese came in here in the
Right.
70s. And because of these government regulations, it's a big
But
opening.
it's not because of government regulation, so it's because of basic economics. They're coming in and they're going to build less expensive cars because nobody knows who they are, nobody trusts them, and if they're good, they will end up becoming trusted, relied upon brands.
Well, look, the reason there's a big opening here, and I agree with you, there's a big opening is, I'm quoting Carlos Tavares now, CEO of Stellantis. The Chinese have a 30% cost advantage, whether it's ICE or EV, it doesn't matter. They've got it on both. That's how they're going to get into this market because the domestics have essentially abandoned the market for inexpensive cars. There's some exceptions, the Trax, which comes from Korea. There's the Ford Maverick, which comes from Mexico. But as for being built in the U.S. by one of the domestics with UAW labor, they've essentially just about abandoned anything under $30,000.
So let me ask you guys.
Hard to make margin.
So you're the Detroit guys, okay? And John just mentioned that you have the Trax coming from Korea.
And in Mexico, I think. No, Trailblazers, Mexico. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
My mistake.
And another car that came out last year, the Buick Envista, gorgeous looking car. Again, it's sort of the entry level thing, and again, it's a car that was developed for the Korean and Chinese markets. Does that matter anymore?
No.
Oh, and the Envista's made in China, right?
No. The Envision's made in
China.
China.
The Envision's China. Okay.
Well, they do make Envistas in China, but they don't sell them here. The ones they sell here, they're making in Korea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, I don't think it matters. I mean, I think most buyers don't know where the vehicle is built. Here in Detroit, a lot do, but even here, a lot don't. And also, I mean, it's a global economy. If the automakers are investing here, building things, developing things, making significant volumes of them here, I don't know that we even should care if they also build some less expensive vehicles in places where labor is cheaper. I'm not sure what.
But in your careers, I mean, you guys have been doing this for long enough that you know that there was a point in time when that was a big deal. I mean, like the aforementioned Japanese cars were like, they shouldn't be here and so on.
Well, that's why they're manufacturing. I mean, you had tariff threats from John Dingell and Dick Gephardt, the big, powerful Midwestern Democrats that big tariffs back in the 80s.
And you also
and so the Japanese started building.
I would throw Ronald Reagan into the mix because
Right,
he's the one who put the voluntary restraint agreement that got the Japanese to agree to limit how many cars they exported to the U.S.
Yeah, that was
also
a huge issue, and then the Japanese started building cars here.
And you also had basic economics. At some point, you build enough of them that it just makes more sense because of currency fluctuations and shipping and a variety of other things to build things where you sell them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So we've talked about General Motors for more than 15 minutes now. Let's switch over to Ford. So there's the the aforementioned Maverick, which the hybrid is just
killing it. It's killing it.
They just
can't build them fast.
Can't build enough of those cars. They're turning down the volume on the F-150 Lightning as they're turning up the volume on the Maverick. Seeing that there's greater acceptance for hybrid technology than there seems to be for full EV technology. They recently cut the price still again for the Mustang Mach-E.
No, they lost their subsidy too.
And so, what do you guys make of the Ford Motor Company?
There's greater acceptance for a vehicle with a base price of $20,000 than there is for one of the base, where the ones they're building start in the 50s.
The Maverick is up close to 24,000 now. It's 23 and change.
I thought the base was still around 22.
No.
But still,
they're taking pricing as to use the industry jargon. In fact, I just read
and it's
the
still
average
and it's still a bargain.
average transaction price for the Maverick is actually $32,000.
Oh yeah. Well,
People load them up.
The ones
they're attracted by the cheap price, and they go, yeah, but I want this, this, and this.
Well, that plus the fact that, I mean, most people who buy new cars, are relatively affluent anyway. I mean, the average price of a new car is 48 grand. A $30,000 Maverick is still a steal. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, Maverick's a brilliant vehicle, and whoever conceived and executed that should be the CEO of Ford Motor Company at some point.
Well, and to that point, I think Ford really knows what its brand is. I think of particularly the U.S. auto companies, arguably any big auto company. Ford knows exactly what it is. It is not going off making these big promises like GM. We're going to be all electric. We're going to be Tesla. They are focused on, and they call them their icon strategy: Mustang, F-150. What's the Bronco?
Yeah.
I mean, they know this.
Okay, now Henry, tell me how brilliant they are when it comes to Lincoln.
Yeah, we're talking Ford, right?
and
we'll go talk. Yeah, I mean,
what the hell is wrong with Lincoln?
Before we do that, can I say one other thing? The icon strategy is brilliant, but the other side of that coin is they've got three things that they built well and people cared about them: F-150, Mustang, and Bronco, and they spent a lot of time building the things that they never managed to get people to care about.
Yeah, I would throw Transit into one of those icons too. Not in the
That
same
is
genre, but they make a
point.
boatload of money on that.
It is on
Great
they
point.
list that
Okay,
as
but
an
Henry,
icon.
but despite this icon thing, Ford has been shoveling in the money in terms of its electrification strategy.
Well, everybody does. I mean,
No, but I mean, it's just like so. Farley on the one hand is saying, oh, hybrids are no good. Now Farley's saying hybrids good. Farley's saying we're going all EV. Didn't give a date, but said they're going all. And now it's like, well, we're going to let the market decide about that. So I'm not saying
which
Farley
is what GM said all along. We'll be 230. We'll be 100% in 2035 if our customers are there.
Right.
So every automaker has struggled with it, and they've all given themselves asterisks, and it's hard to do.
And look how much the whole outlook on EV has changed. 2 years ago, if you said, as a CEO of a car company, we're going all in on EVs, boom, Wall Street was all over it, your stock went up. Today, if you say we're cutting back on EVs, Wall Street's all over it and your stock goes up.
I don't remember seeing GM or Ford stocks going up that much during my career, basically.
Oh, that's right. No, their stock
but it was a Wall Street play because they're all obsessed with Tesla. I mean, you're looking at this $1 trillion value monster over there, and they, understandably want to get some of that. But back to Ford, they understand the value of a Mustang V8, for example. I got back from Daytona a couple weeks ago. They are all in on GT3 racing. They're out there racing their Mustang against Porsche 911s, against Corvettes. They know what their brand is. It is a V8. And then they go off and they make a Mustang Mach-E and a Ford Lightning so they can gain enough government credits so they can keep making the V8, because the V8 is what that's their core brand. So I think Ford understands who they are, even as they struggle like every brand does with this electric transition.
Okay, Mark, you have the future plan for Ford there.
Automotive news future product timeline.
So what
the Bible.
Okay, so what products are we going to presumably see from them?
Okay.
How many of them are iconic?
Let's see. This year, they are suggesting there will be an addition to the Mustang lineup and a freshening of the Bronco. Those are the only two things that would qualify as icons here. There's Maverick, Expedition, Explorer. The F-150 gets a freshening as well, and the Bronco Sport. So, I mean, the icons, are the cars that they promote. But to your point, they build a lot of other stuff. And the Explorer, that was once the leader in its segment, and it was a big popular segment. And man, how much have they squandered that?
Well, that was all the Firestone tire rollover fiasco thing. They never recovered from that. I've seen the new Explorer, and what really hit me right now, it's just a mild refresh. And I think we're seeing a lot of mild refreshes of ICE products as these legacy automakers try to milk their ICE products for as much revenue and profit as they possibly can. And so I don't think we're going to see huge redesigns of ICE products going forward. We're just going to see this this continuous refresh, not spend a lot of money, put some new headlamps and tail lamps
New
and a
software.
bigger screen on the dashboard and call it a day.
Yep. Yep. And I think you're right. I do think that as every automaker realizes just how hard it is to build large numbers of EVs, well, we'll probably see a little bit of a shift to some more money going into refreshing and new versions of ICE, like GM when they backtracked and they said, yeah, plug-in hybrids, we're going to build those again. So I think we'll see a little bit. But you're right. I mean, most of the internal combustion vehicles are going to be tweaks rather than turning a new page.
Here's a question for you guys. Last week we had Larry Burns on the show, former R&D head at General Motors. And one of the things he was talking about after the show was trying to get the industry back to being a fashion business, where you could redesign cars every 1 to 2 years, going back to the annual styling change. But that's a lead into my question for you guys. Can Tesla continue to do this no styling change? Or okay, the 3 got a mild change. They've delayed the one for the Y. Henry, you own a Tesla.
Yeah.
What do you think? Can Tesla continue to enjoy the kind of growth that it's had if the cars all look the same? As a 3 today looks like a 3 yesterday, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, no, I don't feel any. My Tesla's a 2019. I don't feel any great urge to go out and buy the new 2024 with the mild refresh. It's the same. I think, and it's. I mean, as with Tesla, it's fascinating to have this disruptive company in here doing things differently. From the design we're talking about to dealerships to autopilot. It's just great to have a company in the business here asking all these questions. They advertise themselves a technology company. As long as the hardware holds up in my car, because the real fascination with the Tesla is I am just constantly getting over-the-air updates. I mean, there's no automobile I've ever owned that updates every month like my cell phone does. So I think that's where they concentrate on their customer, is making the drive experience.
Is it enough? And
we'll see if that's enough. So far, it has been. They continue to dominate this space, even though we've all predicted that as the legacy automakers came in, they would suffer, and arguably they've had to cut prices significantly, but they still dominate this space.
And the legacy automakers are just in with their with a toe in the pool right now too. I mean, the volumes that they can build.
Right. But the customers don't want them. I mean, customers don't want EVs.
Henry,
Henry,
sales are going up every month, and they will go up at the end of this year. I mean, EV sales in registrations increased 53% in 2023.
Yeah, you got early adopters like me.
They're people who want them. You can't say people don't want them, and 53% more people bought them last year.
I'm saying the majority of buyers.
In that case, say that.
No, that's
the total market is not ready for them yet.
Over 1 million Americans bought EVs.
Oh yeah, I bought it. I bought 2.
Yeah,
I love EVs.
But
I'm saying. You have a federal government that's saying 67% of your sales have to be EV by 2032.
Well, that's going to change. That'll change.
Everything
you say it's going to change. I'm just saying that is what these companies are facing.
That's not on the books. That's not on the books.
2026.
Those are proposed.
This is on the books. 2026 in California, 35% of have
California.
to be EV.
Agreed.
Otherwise, you get fined $20,000. But here's the thing. Right now, everybody talks about, California's up to 16% of EV sales. That's Tesla driven. You look at the legacy automakers,
they're the ones who can build them.
Their sales are at 2-3%. You got to go from 2% to 35% in 2 years.
No, the Biden administration proposals to slow down some of the targets that they're pushing for are a reasonable recognition of the fact that these things are hard to build. But it's not a reflection that people don't want them.
No,
back to John's question. So should this become a fashion industry more than it is? Okay, I want an answer on that one. And 2, is a company that doesn't refresh its exterior fashion, which we have long thought was the most important part of the vehicle purchase, can they continue to make profit?
If I can say the first thing on this, if Tesla does decide that it's important to make design statements, please, God, keep the guy who designed the Cybertruck away from it. I mean,
look, that's Franz von Holzhausen. He's done all their vehicles. You know, Franz knows what he's doing. Franz, that was not a mistake. I know a lot of people hate the styling on that truck.
It's absolutely not a mistake.
I love it. I love the Cybertruck.
I've seen, no, we should get into this because
coolest looking truck I've ever seen.
there's a lot of people in the design community who are bowing down to that truck. And, you know, Sid Mead, a god amongst designers, was the one who came out and when he first saw it said, Tesla has completely changed the form language for pickup trucks from here on out.
Yeah, but you don't understand. That's the auto critic for the Detroit Free Press.
Yeah.
Sid Mead. Mark Phelan.
No. I mean,
No,
they will sell everyone that they build. But I don't know that that's the vehicle that I would point to as the case that Tesla should become a design-driven company.
Yeah.
Is all I'm saying.
Okay, but what about the other guys?
But fashion. I mean, Bob Lutz used to say this all the time as well. The problem is that GM forgot that the auto industry is a fashion business, and it's right. You build a beautiful car. The Invista, we love it because it's affordable. It's also gorgeous.
Right.
It's a gorgeous $25,000 car.
Right.
You know, that's magic when you can do that. So yeah, I don't know if we'll ever see recycle changed styling as often as they used to, but you build a beautiful car, people are going to want to buy it. Yeah,
but it's hard. I mean, the regulations are such with pedestrian standards, with aero standards, fuel economy standards. I mean, these automakers really have to work inside of an envelope that's much more restrictive than if you go back to some of those great Harvey Earl designs that we saw at the Detroit Institute of Arts recently, where they're doing cars that look like jets with wings on them and everything. You just can't do that.
We years and years ago, we had Jack Telmack, former head of design of Ford, on the show. And he said, Hawks are designed for, a given performance, if you will. Eagles are, canaries are. He says, they don't look the same. So his argument was, forget all this talk about aerodynamics and regulations. It's up to us designers to take that and just make it beautiful.
And every new regulation, pedestrian protection led to some really ugly front ends and hoods. And after about 3 years of building really ugly front ends and hoods, the designers figured out, I can still meet the regulation and build something beautiful. So my belief and my experience is that every new exterior regulation there is a learning curve on how do we meet that and make it beautiful, and I think they can do it.
They can. Time out. We got to take a quick commercial break. Shout out to our sponsors.
How do Bridgestone tires stop shorter on wet roads? It's their HydroTrack technology, but you don't have to know how the science works. Just where the brake is. What really matters is their Bridgestone.
We want to know what drives your testing. OTA, connected car, diagnostics, remote testing. Intrepid Control Systems is here to help you work from anywhere. Intrepid Control Systems, driven by your data.
All right, we're back talking all things cars here.
Okay, so we've talked about two of the three. In Joe White, our colleague from Reuters, has come up with a great term for how to describe the Detroit companies. He's now calling them the MC3, sort of a tribute.
The Motor City 5,
right? The
tribute.
Yeah, since we
the
lost
late
Wayne Kramer, who just died.
And so the third of the MC3, Stellantis, aka Chrysler. I mean, I think we probably still refer to it more as Chrysler than Stellantis, and I'm sure people in Europe have smoke coming out of their ears. So what's going on over there?
Well, a lot of different owners in the last couple decades. That's always got to be tough. Obviously, Marchione was brilliant when he came in and recognized the value of Jeep as a global brand, and Ram, and that's where their money is. But again, these are not easy brands to electrify. Jeep's trying, but how do you make an electric car?
Well, they're making great claims with their plug-in hybrid sales.
But their plug-in hybrids are gas cars. I mean, how do you make an electric car that goes.
Well, what do you guys think? Are PHEVs the next thing? I mean, so the BEVs are still growing. They're going to grow again this year, but they're not growing where the industry planned for them to be.
Right.
Are PHEVs the
There's
answer?
a place for them. There absolutely is. And for some people, they may be the long-term answer. I think 10 years from now, I would be surprised if the growth in EVs has not substantially outpaced growth in plug-in hybrids. But plug-in hybrids are a perfect solution for a lot of people.
Look, we just reported in Autoline Daily today, PHEV sales are booming in China.
Yeah.
Booming in China.
Well, China's got regulations that encourage
but
them
what it
also.
is,
Sorry, Henry.
It's in rural areas and smaller cities where the PHEVs, where people need more range.
Yeah. And there's probably, even in China, which has pretty advanced charging infrastructure, probably more people who are doing farm work and things like that don't have access to charging. So no, I mean, plug-in hybrids, they are a great, horribly underappreciated technology here in America.
But again, there's a reason that General Motors decided not to bridge to EVs. They went all in on EVs because plug-ins are expensive. It's expensive to bring two different drivetrains into a car, to bring an engine block and a battery in, and it adds to complexity, adds to cost. And I get the EV. That EV transition, that the EV is simple, it's cheap, it's less labor intensive. But it's a totally different lifestyle, the way you drive an EV versus a gas car. Look at Hertz experience. I mean, Hertz was a disaster because people walked in and said, that car does not meet our needs.
Hertz didn't tell people how or where to charge them before they handed them the key either.
They didn't give them a key, they gave them a card, and they didn't even know how to open the door.
But that's the thing with a plug-in, is you get into a plug-in and you know how to operate. It operates just like a gas car. The question is it just too expensive? I mean, again, the beauty of the Chevy Trax is it's just a gas engine. It's $21,000.
All right, so far be it from me to argue with one of my guests, but so your argument of, you have two powertrains, that's too expensive. Did anybody tell Toyota that?
Well,
they seem to be doing pretty darn well with
hybrids, not plug-ins.
But again, the argument against hybrids was that you have two systems.
Yep,
okay,
correct.
So what is the difference between a plug-in hybrid and a hybrid? Basically, a larger battery.
Right.
That's it. Okay. Plus the plug. But I mean, so this argument basically of the two powertrains, I mean, it's one that so what is the most valuable company that isn't Tesla on earth? Oh, that's right, it's Toyota. And hybrids in every single one of their products.
And to make your point, and talking about plug-ins, Consumer Reports recently did a study, and plug-in hybrids are very susceptible to quality problems because they've got two different powertrains, except Toyota plug-in hybrids, which are as reliable as every other damn thing that they build.
And then they found that just straight hybrids were the most reliable.
Yes,
of all.
But Toyota's plug-in hybrids were basically on a par with their regular hybrids. So the Toyota can do it. Toyota can make it affordable. Toyota can build them with good quality. Are all points that cannot be reinforced enough.
All right, so we've missed here on Stellantis. So Chrysler, will Chrysler exist in 5 years?
Chrysler brand.
People still buy minivans.
Yeah, Chrysler
sure.
brand.
The minivan. That's it.
Well, that's basically what they have right now, which by the way is a PHEV.
Yep.
What do you think, Henry?
I don't know.
You don't
Yeah,
know. Okay.
Predict anything 5 years from now.
All right, Dodge.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Still
Absolutely.
exists.
And what will they have? Maybe it's on your sheet.
Twin turbo.
I can
twin
tell you
turbo
what they say
V6s.
they're going to have.
Twin turbo V6.
Yeah, what's the name of the V6?
Hurricane?
Hurricanes. You have Dodges. People would be buying Dodge Hurricanes.
According to the Automotive News Future Product Pipeline product placement, in 5 years they will have the electric Charger, the electric Challenger, and an electric crossover, perhaps two electric crossovers.
Hornet?
Doesn't mention the Hornet, but the Hornet would still be in production then. So the Hornet.
Okay, so here's a question for you guys. How many vehicles do you need in a brand for it to survive and thrive? I would argue you need at least 5.
If all of your dealers sell all of your brands, which is essentially what the former Chrysler Group does, they're all Dodge, Ram, and Chrysler. I think it's immaterial. I think that if you can just keep building Pacificas and call them Chrysler Pacificas, and it's like if your last name had a hyphen in it.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Mark. But now you're up against a Toyota that only has one brand. So one advertising budget, one sales and service budget,
But you don't have to advertise the whole brand. You just do ads for the Chrysler Pacifica, and at the end you say get it at your Chrysler Ram Jeep dealer. That's how it looks to me. I could be completely misreading this.
So you guys, you mentioned earlier, one of the iconic brands of Ford is Bronco, and Bronco seems to be doing a pretty good job of eating Jeep's lunch.
That's where all the Ford Lightning employees are going, right? They're all leaving the 2 Lightning shifts and going and working on Broncos. Can't make enough of them.
So what does Jeep do?
Come out with a new vehicle. I mean, the Wrangler is getting long in tooth. I like the Bronco a lot, but the best thing about the Bronco is that it puts some competitive pressure on Jeep engineers, because they had been making, the Wrangler was the best of its kind. They had been making it steadily better, but they hadn't had to meet anybody or beat anybody. Bronco came along and said, "Yeah, okay, you think you're pretty good? Top this."
Did Jeep walk away? Did it try to expand the brand too much? You go from everything from a dinky little Renegade to this giant monster Grand Wagoneer. Is that too much bandwidth? I mean, Jeep, what's the image? Rugged outdoors, off-road, hardcore, Rubicon Trail. Then you look at the Renegade, and the Renegade doesn't fit that image, I don't think.
Most Jeep owners, first of all, never do any of that stuff. They love to be associated with a brand that can do it. Grand Cherokee owners, how many of them ever go off road? Old Cherokee owners. So no, they buy the idea of the capability, but they don't. They expect a little more capability than if they were buying a Chevy Blazer. But that's about it, I think. But there's no reason they can't. The problem with the Grand Wagoneer is that they're building it poorly, and they may have messed up in the basic definition of what that vehicle should be. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're pricing it opposite an Escalade, and have they given it the stuff to compete against Escalades and Mercedes, GLSs? The market seems to be saying no.
I mean, my sense, and you guys will get a proper Jeep expert on this who'll clear this up someday, but my sense is that Jeep went Renegade because they were trying to become a mega brand. I mean, this was their volumes were increasing so fast under Marchione that I could see where they thought, we can make Jeep into Ford, we can make Jeep into Chevy, we can cover this whole bandwidth. And I like the Renegade. I thought that was a great little entry-level car. But I at the same time, I think they also figured out that Jeep is a premium brand. I mean, Jeep is Buick. Jeep is it's not an entry brand. You can make so much. People cross shop BMWs and Mercedes with Jeeps. It's extraordinary in the luxury segment. So I think they're realizing where their margins are. It's at the higher end. It's with more premium and luxury customers, and that's where you make your money. I'm an old Porsche guy. I mean, Porsche. I still own a 1987 Porsche 924. Porsche thought, we got a great brand. We're going to make entry-level Porsches for $20,000. And at some point they said, why are we messing around with that kind of margin? Look at the margin we can make north of $70,000. I think that's what Jeep is realizing.
But Henry, this cross-shopping with these higher brands, I mean, isn't fundamentally the cross-shopping predicated on the capability, the Jeepness of Jeep versus, nice leather?
I'll take it. I will take a Jeep Wrangler off-road before I'll take a Mercedes G-Wagon off-road. It is better. I mean, it is real. That brand capability is real. And that's what gets them more premium.
But isn't there a danger from, I think, what John was suggesting, that they're sort of losing their way by trying to be too many things?
But Jeep is a global brand. And we were talking about the Renegade like it's a failure. The Renegade is a great success. They sell lots and lots of Renegades and build lots and lots of Renegades in South America and Europe. It was always a marginal player here. And it's long in tooth now. I think it makes perfect sense to drop it. Sergio Marchionne was a genius. He put together a brilliant structure of a company, but he was also a guy who never met a product program that he didn't want to delay. A lot of Stellantis, a lot of Chrysler, Ram, Dodge's problems, Jeep, Ram, Dodge's problems right now lie at the foot of replacement vehicles that should have been introduced 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, Jeep sales would not be down the way they are if they had replaced the Cherokee, which was, I believe, their second best-selling vehicle at the time, rather than just letting it age into complete obsolescence and shut down the plant. So, I mean, Jeep, there's a place for a wide variety of Jeeps, and there are markets, that will buy them. There'll probably be a little Renegade-like vehicle from Jeep here again at some point. But even if there's not, there will be in China, there will be in South America, there will be in Europe.
Mm-hmm. So isn't the Jeep Avenger more like a Renegade than a
Yes,
Wrangler?
and they're selling it in Europe right now, and
that's
think
an EV.
it may have been the European car of the year last year, but I would have to look it up to be sure.
The Avenger's electric, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So we got 15 minutes to do all the Asian companies. All right. So before we get to Toyota, you guys mentioned that you both have driven, and I haven't. So the Honda Prologue, which then sort of brings us back to General Motors, because basically, isn't the Prologue on a General Motors platform?
And it uses Ultium batteries, motors, and software. Yes.
They're both made in Mexico.
Yeah, in the same plant as GM plant as the Blazer EV.
So the two cars are going down the same line, or they have?
As far as I know, yeah.
Yeah. So
Honda's got its own engineers, and they're running their own safety quality gates in production, and they're very outspokenly optimistic about being able to get 40,000 this year that they will sell.
Mm-hmm. So
40,000's a lot.
Yeah.
This is the brand EV problem. If you got 50 grand to spend, you're going to spend it on a BMW iX or i4.
God, no.
No, not an iX.
Sorry.
iX is $80,000. Yeah, BMW i4, a Tesla Model Y, or a Honda Prologue. I just think that's a very difficult space for Honda.
But then, Henry, look at the success that Hyundai and especially Kia are having with $50,000 and $60,000 EVs. And pre-COVID, if you had said to me, John, in 4 years, Kia's going to be selling cars that cost 60 grand, I would have laughed. I would have said, no, the market will never go for it.
Are they selling?
And yet, if you look at the Hyundai group as a group, Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, they're only number 2 to Tesla in this country in EV sales.
Yeah, but they're selling volumes of 30,000.
You got to start someplace.
That's
compared
to zero, though. I mean, that's massive growth.
But those are luxury numbers. 30,000 is luxury.
No, it's not. The average price of a new vehicle now is $48,000.
30,000 volume.
I'm sorry, Henry.
Yeah,
pardon me.
Honda's a volume.
So, okay.
Honda deals in 100,000 plus volume segments. So I think that's hard to
okay, is it a good car?
Volume segment. Yeah.
The Prologue.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it looks and feels like a Honda, I think. There's no common sheet metal with the Blazer. They call it neo-rugged, which must have made some designer terribly happy. It's a new look, but it will look consistent with other Hondas. And I think the interior looked and felt like a Honda too.
Yeah, the one disappointment I have with the interior, because Honda's been killing it in interiors with the new Civic and the Accord. This cool honeycomb interior. Yeah, it had a real style to it, and I thought the Prologue was it didn't have much character in that regard. You don't know how restricted they are because they are sharing a platform with another automaker.
It's all new materials, though.
But again, to me, the Honda Prologue competes against the Honda Passport. Honda Passport is $10,000 less, has double the range, fills up 400 miles in 1 minute. Again, it's just I just think it's a really hard sell for these mainstream brands to go into EVs.
So do you guys think there's any possibility that at some point, maybe in 5 years, that General Motors will absorb Honda?
No, not a chance.
Henry's thinking about it at least.
He didn't shoot it down right away, right?
Yeah. Who knew that that Peugeot would buy Chrysler? I mean, it's a.
Who's surprised Chrysler got sold again, though?
What do you think, John?
I think we're going to see not so much mergers of big companies like that as a lot more joint projects, like this Prologue.
Yep.
Being shared with GM and Honda, and GM are sharing development of fuel cells too, by the way.
And the Acura ZDX shares with the Cadillac Lyriq,
right,
and it's going to come out of the same plant.
So, I've talked to GM and Honda people, and the GM people especially have been said, we got a great relationship here. Boy, do we work together well.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. In fact, we reported this week on Autoline Daily, Renault, Stellantis, who was the other one, Sean, that were talking about getting together, and Volkswagen, talking about like Airbus. Airbus is, these different countries have got together to build aircraft to compete against Boeing. Well, those three companies are doing this because they're scared silly about the Chinese coming into their market, and they realize they got to do something fast. So I think we're going to see a lot more collaboration.
I'll tell you the other thing that was interesting, though. I was out at the Consumer Electronics Show, and Honda showed its first
EVs.
Because they're adamant. I mean,
their own EVs, not shared with GM.
Yeah, I mean, they're adamant about going all EV as GM is. I mean, their timeline is longer, 2040 instead of 2035. But they are absolutely committing to EVs. But they obviously don't like the Ultium platform. And they talked a lot about this new platform that they're going to build their vehicles on is going to be lighter and more efficient. I mean, this is an engineering. All these companies have their own cultures. This is an obsessively engineered brand, and I think they really want to do their own platform. And I think that makes it harder for these companies to.
All right, never mind.
Like you're talking
I didn't even propose that idea.
Could I ask a fast question of Henry, though? I was not at the Consumer Electronics Show. I read carefully the materials Honda put out about their vehicles, and I read a lot of stuff. We'll be lighter, we'll have better batteries, we'll go farther in 2030, which all strikes me as far enough away and not connected to anything they revealed about hardware now. I thought it was kind of sketchy. There was less detail than I would have hoped for.
But very much committed to it, as opposed to doing any more Ultium development. I think Ultium is they just wanted to get into the market, Honda
woke up one day and realized it was way behind everybody. They needed a stopgap. They ran to GM. Right. GM said, jump on the Ultium platform with us. But the Ultium platform makes sense for General Motors, which is a full line manufacturer.
Exactly.
Honda is not. They really aren't. I mean, they're very broad, but they're not a full line.
Yeah.
And GM wants a platform where one size fits all, right? You just drop different top hats on it. That's a brilliant strategy for GM. Not so for Honda.
Yeah.
So I can see Honda wanted to do its own.
Its Prologue weighed 5,600 pounds.
Oh, you were able to get the weight out of them? Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not EVs
are heavy. And it's fun to drive, but you feel the weight in the Prologue in a way that you don't in any other Honda I've ever driven.
Because the Ultium platform is a compromise to fit everything.
That's right. Because Tesla Model X is a 4,900 pound car. That's their comparable size car. The Tesla Model 3 I drive is 4,000 pounds, or a lot less.
That's one of the debates right now. Is do you go and play the top hat game, where you have a common platform and just drop different top hats on it, or do you build purpose-built EVs just for the duty cycle that they're going to go through? And I think both strategies might actually be able to work.
I think GM's going to do both. I mean, Ultium, the Ultium's not a vehicle platform. Ultium's a bunch of batteries and motors and software. There is a different EV-only vehicle platform that underpins the Blazer and the Lyric, but they're going to do multiple different sizes of those. So, I mean, there'll be different sizes of skateboards.
It's just longer or wider, or narrower, but everything's essentially the same.
So I just
We'll
thought
see.
I just thought of another GM Honda collaboration that we probably don't want to mention. That would be Cruise, which goes back to my beginning of the show with the AT&T outage, but we won't go there. All right, so let's touch on Toyota and then get to the Korean companies. So it seems to me that, I mean, we had Sheldon Brown, the chief engineer of Tacoma, on the show 3-4 weeks ago, and talking about their dedication to Tacoma, which is basically still dominating the mid-sized pickup truck. And you get the sense that trucks, at least in this market, are not what you associate necessarily with Toyota.
God, yes, the Tacoma, they built their reputation on that.
But I mean, I would say the Camry is the Camry and the Corolla are probably more.
Ask a Californian.
You agree with me, Henry?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look at the Tundra.
Smart man.
Yeah, the Tundra. Yeah, Tundra never got a
This
tow
Phelan
hauler.
guy. So, I made a list. I mean, we have this long list of all these vehicles that they have. I mean, it is just shocking to me when you see that many products. I mean, are they like? Is there momentum on their side?
Toyota?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like it's on Jupiter's side. Try stop on the biggest planet in the solar system. Yeah. Yeah, and they've got 1 million individual models, but they're not shy about letting them go and bringing them back later. I mean, some companies get harassed, get harangued when they drop a model line. Toyota drops them right and left when people get tired of them. When was the last time you thought about a Celica, or an MR2? They'll just keep trying and they'll keep selling them, I think.
I'm struck. I mean, we talk a lot about these days about Tesla as a disruptor. I mean, just remember what a disruptor Toyota was when it came in to this market, to the point that GM, co-owned a plant with them, the NUMMI plant, just so they could learn, how do these guys do this? How do you make cars so consistently with such good quality? And I think they're different in that sense. They have a much longer view of things. They've gotten a lot of blowback by not making EV promises like a lot of these companies. I think they look a lot longer on trends. That's why they're committed to hybrids. I was struck by, when I went to Japan for the first time last year, just how much that is a highly competitive market, as ours is. They dominate their domestic market. It's remarkable how many Toyotas there were. I just think it's a very good company. They know what they are. And they build for the long run. My favorite Toyota story is the first Lexus I took on a track was the two-door
RC
thing. Yeah, the RC. When they introduced that into the market, and I went out on track the RC, and I'm going around the car with the engineer, and it had a truck brake on it. And every other sports car had one the little digital brake. And I said to the engineer, I said, "You have a truck brake."
You mean handbrake?
No, truck brake.
It was a pedal parking brake as opposed to
pedal parking.
Parking brake. Yeah, I thought I called it a truck brake. And I said,
I'll translate for you.
Yeah, thanks. He said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, they don't do. They just don't make. They don't get into a extreme cost. They just keep making things consistent.
And they don't worry about being first with the technology.
Exactly.
Either.
Exactly.
I mean, talk to the folks at Consumer Reports. They'll tell you all day long, Honda and Toyota, despite their technical reputations, they are very conservative about rolling out new technologies.
Right. Well, it gets back to what Henry said. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yep. And you want something Six Sigma in your manufacturing plants, that tells you go work on some other problem.
Yeah.
So John, how do you see Toyota?
Look, it's a phenomenal company. Like you said, it's second in size in terms of market cap, only to Tesla. But I think if you look at their sales over the last decade, they've sort of topped out at 11 million units. The company's not growing. And I think they're going to lose their ass in Southeast Asia because they sell a lot of cheap little cars. Daihatsus, for example, which is owned by Toyota, a lot of cheap Corollas and the like in Southeast Asia. And I think they're going to get their clocks cleaned by the Chinese. I think they're going to lose millions of units of sales before the decade's out.
Is there any company that will not lose to the Chinese?
Well, the Chinese are going to take over the lower end of the market. So whoever plays in the low end, kiss your ass goodbye. Seriously, because they're going to come in and take it over. So that's mainly going to impact the Japanese and the Korean automakers. Some Europeans to that degree. Interestingly, the Detroit 3 have essentially abandoned that segment in those markets. They'll be largely unaffected in that region of the world.
Okay, so we should move on to the Koreans because we're got a minute and a half. All right, so you guys have mentioned the expensive Kia, the EV9 3-row. I mean, the only 3-row. Well, there is that row in the back of the
X.
Yeah, and doesn't the S have a available?
Yes, as a 3-row.
Yeah, but.
Yeah,
3 rows as we.
I'm gonna.
Think
I mean,
of them.
not to jump your question, but I'm going to compare an EV9 and an EQS just because I to John's point earlier, I think it's really interesting that both Hyundai and Kia are looking at this EV opportunity to move themselves premium. I mean, the Honda Prologue looks like a Honda, behaves like a Honda. The Kia EV6. The Hyundai Ioniq 6, the Kia EV9, I mean, these are different cars. And they still have Kia and Hyundai badges on them. They are different. They are different model lines. And I'm interested if those catch on as premium. I had a buddy of mine recently wanted to buy his first electric car. I took him a Tesla. I took him a Hyundai Ioniq 5. Loved both of them. I said, "Which one did you buy?" He said, "I got $50,000. I'm buying the Tesla. I'm not buying a Hyundai." So you got that brand issue, but they're really interesting in how different I think these cars are from their core brand.
Yeah, they're definitely steps, that they are allowing the manufacturers to get into markets that 10 years ago they wouldn't have dreamt were available to them, I think.
Look, I still believe the market's going to go EV. It may not happen in the time frame we thought 2 years ago, but it's going to happen anyway. And I think the three maybe that have really sat on their hands here are Toyota, Honda, Nissan, in the fact that they've let the Koreans, Hyundai, Kia, even Genesis, really, you got to include that. Boom, they've established a foothold in the EV segment. They're way ahead of Toyota, Honda, Nissan, and that's where the cross shopping really takes place.
So it's a luxury. EVs are a luxury product right now.
Right now,
and they're all playing to that.
Right.
But to me, the Kia EV9 is more of a luxury product than a Honda Prologue is.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a more foreseeable extension of the Telluride, but it is a luxury vehicle. Can I build on something you said about Toyota? The Toyota needs to get more serious about their electric vehicles. The activists who are giving them a hard time saying that they are betraying something by continuing to build trucks and hybrids, they're completely missing the point. There is a place for all those vehicles, but Toyota's the biggest car company in the world, and every EV they have sold so far has been irrelevant. They need to introduce something to show they're serious about the technology, and then they need to keep building millions of other things.
They're working on it. I mean, we all know the cars that they put out there. What is it? The BZ4X or whatever. It's a compliance car. It's a compliance car.
Which puts them 10 years behind
effort.
everybody else in this market.
It's actually a good car. I really like it, but it's not competitive. But what I'm getting at is, and Toyota's not talked a lot about this, they have a crash program in Japan going on. They call it the BEV factory. And they're toying around with everything that Tesla is. Gigacastings, they're not calling it unboxed, but new assembly processes and the like.
We need to see the fruits.
They know they're behind Tesla. Yes. They know this. And right now, they're letting Akio parade around the world with his "I told you so" kind of mantra. But behind the scenes, Toyota's working feverishly to come out with a competitive EV.
And we need to see it, I think.
Well, I mean, I just basically think, okay, you got this giant corporation that has all of this intellectual horsepower and engineering prowess and manufacturing prowess. You know, they're working on everything.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
they know what their customers want.
Right.
I mean, that's
and
the
they're
bottom
gonna sell
line.
it to it. And you know, and you know, Larry Burns last week had one of the most brilliant statements of all. You know, that what we're doing with a lot of these electric vehicles is we're digging the lithium out of the mines and then sticking it in the parking lot. I mean, and that's what it's coming down to. And to go to the point of Genesis, going back to the Koreans, because I'm trying to keep us in this, is that Genesis announced today they're going to slow down their EV program and they're going to be developing more hybrids.
Interesting.
Go figure. So Henry, you're right.
Gas cards.
And with that, we ought to end the show, because if Henry's right, there's nothing more to say. No, I'm just being facetious. It's been terrific having you guys here. This is
Thank
really
you.
good.
Yeah,
Great
thanks for having us.
discussion.
Yeah, great to be here.
Yeah.
Always great to be here.
Yep.
Well, good. So, Gary, unless you got something burning, we'll wrap it up.
We'll wrap it up.
Okay. Thanks, everybody, for having tuned in.
AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey, and by Intrepid Control Systems, over-the-air engineering. Boost your game.